السلام عليكم شباب وبنات، شو اخباركم؟ ان شاء الله انكم طيبين. سامحوني البارحة ما قدرت اتصور، ما قدرت اعطيكم رأيي الشخصي على الاقتصاد وين نحن رايحين في سنة 2025. ولكن اليوم يوم حلو، يوم جميل، بنتكلم على سهم. هذا السهم مهم جدا. بس قبل ما نتكلم على السهم اليوم عندي تعليق، عندي ملاحظات على الكلام اللي قاعد يصير في السوق. وطبعا في عنا بعض الدول قاعدة تتغير قوانينها وتتغير الطريقة اللي الناس فيها بتتأثر، وأيضا بيتغير الاقتصاد يا بطريقة إيجابية يا بطريقة سلبية. ما ندري نحن شو اللي بيصير، شو اللي صاير. طبعا أنا ما بدخل في السياسة لأن بعدنا ما بدنا نتكلم في السياسة، ورأيي الشخصي طبعا على هذا الموضوع، ولكن بنتكلم على الاقتصاد وكيف بنتأثر نحن هنا في أمريكا في هذا الموضوع في هذا المجال، لأن هذا أهم شيء عندنا نقدر نتكلم عنه ونقدر ندرس من بعض ونتعلم من بعض ونشوف كيف ممكن الواحد يستفيد. زين، أنا اسمي حمزة، أتابع محللين اقتصاديين حول أمريكا، يمكن تقريبا الحين صرنا فوق 35 محلل اقتصادي، وندرس السوق وندرس بعض الأسهم المهمة اللي نشوفها فيها فرص، وبنتكلم على هذا السهم. بس قبل ما نتكلم على السهم أبى أعطيكم رأيي الشخصي على هذا الموضوع، وهذا الموضوع مهم جدا. قبل ما ندخل في الموضوع الله يخليكم، طبعا مثل ما انتم عارفين أول شيء ما أبغي منكم شيء، بس اضغطوا على زر اللايك، بتساعدوني بتساعدوا القناة، وإن شاء الله بنطور وبنقدر نتكلم كل يوم إذا بس عطيتوني اللايك، وما أبي شيء غيره. فخلنا ندخل على موضوع الأساسي اللي هو موضوع
regime in Syria. The power balance in the Middle East has shifted. Joining us right now with what President-elect Trump's strategy.
فطبعا مثل ما سمعتوا بنتكلم على سوريا، وطبعا مثل ما انتم عارفين الوضع مختلف، الوضع متغير، ولكن نبغى نسمع من محلل اقتصادي وفي نفس الوقت يمكن يكون سياسي، بما انه هذا المحلل اللي بيتكلم اللي اسمه كريم سجادبور ما محلل سياسي واكثر محلل اقتصادي. ابى اشوف شو رايه، ابى افهم منه على وين رايحين نحن خلال السنين القادمة.
Strategy will be navigating these new dynamics is Carnegie Endowment Middle East Program Senior Fellow Kariim Sajapur. Kariim, this is completely uncharted territory, and there's a lot of things that are happening and spinning. You know this area so well. Tell us what you think is happening and where we're going to be headed over the next 6 months to a year.
Well, Becky, this is a hugely significant moment that after 50 some years.
قبل ما يدخل في الموضوع طبعا سألته أن شو توقعاتك بموضوع البلد هذا خلال 6 شهور أو السنة القادمة.
Years of being in power, the Assad regime in Syria melted away before our eyes, and it does potentially enormously change the balance of power in the Middle East, in that for many years, Iran has been the region's most powerful actor, in that it dominates 5 failing states: Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and Gaza in the Palestinian territories. Now Iran has been dealt some pretty significant blows. They've lost Syria. Lebanese Hezbollah, the crown jewel of the Iranian revolution, has been decimated by Israel. And now Turkey is emerging as a real regional power. So this is a potentially very significant moment in the modern history of the Middle East.
يعني هنا طبعا بترجم لكم للناس اللي ما فهمت شو قال انه شفنا نحن سقوط مثل سقوط ايران.
And what are the potential, leadership things that come into this vacuum at this point? What are the potential outcomes? Are they good?
So the emerging leader of Syria, one of the important emerging leaders, is this gentleman, Mr. Jolani. And he doesn't have a background which inspires much confidence, in that he has a background associated with Al-Qaeda, with ISIS, But up until now, he's been pretty pragmatic. He doesn't talk about radicalism. He talks about reconciliation. He talks about reconstruction. And so I asked, my reporter friends who are on the ground in Syria, if they get a chance to interview him, to ask him a simple question, which is, what country does he most hope to emulate? What is his ideal vision for Syria? Because just in terms of ideology, his background is similar to someone who has a background like the Taliban. But when he talks about his vision, it's something more akin to the United Arab Emirates in Dubai. And the reality is that if his goal is really to rebuild Syria, a country has been decimated, the only way he's going to get foreign investment from Europe and the very wealthy Gulf Arab countries is if he charts a path which is focused on tolerance and pragmatism, not Islamist ideology.
Jelani is somebody, though, who has a U.S. bounty on his head. I've heard him described as being very sophisticated, though. How would you advise the incoming Trump administration to deal with him?
He's not the only player in Syria. And as we've seen over the last couple of days, millions of displaced Syrians in neighboring countries are now pouring back into the country. Mm-hmm. I think for the United States, whether it's the Biden administration or the Trump administration, there's no longer a will in America to try to transform the Middle East into liberal democracy. But there are some important U.S. national security interests. One is keeping ISIS at bay, and there are 900 U.S. troops still in Syria to help keep ISIS at bay. And you also want to obviously contain any chemical weapons the Assad regime has. And you want to prevent Syria from devolving into another failed state, which explodes into more global refugees. So I would say best case outcome in Syria could be something along the lines of Turkey. But the worst case could be very bad, whether it's a Taliban-style government or even a failed state and the resurgence of ISIS.
Kareem, having outside investment and sort of coming into the 21st century, maybe we don't have, maybe we don't get a kind of democracy that we're a Western-style democracy, but just bringing in investment and doing things for the Syrian people to raise the quality of life. Is there an individual that would step forward and really want that to happen, or do we get another person that wants palaces and Ferraris and Maseratis and doesn't? That absolute power corrupts absolutely. It seems like. But every once in a while, historically, someone steps up and looks around and says, I love my people and I want what's best for them. Is there any possibility that happens?
It's a great question. I'm always reminded of an observation that Henry Kissinger made. He said that before he went into government, government when he was a professor at Harvard. He thought that the individual didn't really matter that much in history because nation states follow their own natural interests regardless of who's in power. And he said that after he served in government, he reached the exact opposite conclusion, which is that actually individuals shape history and individuals have a most profound impact on history. And so sometimes we see people emerge who are able to become great leaders, putting the national interests and countries' economic interests before any kinds of ideology. So far, it's very early days in Syria. We haven't seen that, but God knows this is a country which has experienced one of the most brutal dictatorships and one of the most brutal civil wars of the last half century. And the Syrian people are certainly yearning for someone who wants to rebuild